all these JVMs in a different perspective. So you have, in my environment, I have about 40 JVMs here, maybe 4 dozen, right? So how to look at it all in one spot? I want to look at the hotspots. Each of these cells in this heat map represents a single JVM, okay? Whether it's a storage node, proxy node, or client node, okay? If it's an extend TCP client, we don't see that here because it's not part of the quote-unquote the cluster, all right? Now, let's look at something interesting here. So let's look at CPU utilization. I want to find out where are my busiest JVMs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a threshold of 20%. Anything above 20%, it's going to turn orange or red. So obviously, the more red it is, the higher the CPU utilization. The closer it's being orange, then the CPU utilization is roughly around 20%. So guess what? I see a couple. Now, of course, this is updating in real time, right? And so, for example, if I have like this node right here, I can click on it. Well, this node happens to be one of my storage nodes. But if you look at this orange node right here, this is a client. It's a writer. Okay. If I clicked on the entire host itself, by the way, I can see all of its JVMs and all of its performance metrics for each of the node, all the JVMs. You can obviously sort based on any of these KPIs. You can look at the publisher and receiver success rates at any given point in time. You can also insert many other columns that we collect right now, many other performance metrics that we collect for each of these JVMs. Okay, packets repeat, packet sent, which is obviously an indication of whether or not it's been a healthy network environment. CPU utilization of the JVMs within a particular server. Okay, you can also do filtering or grouping. So let's say I want to group based on the type of nodes they are. Very easy. I can say let's go ahead and group by node type. And I also want to group based on, well, before I even do the second level grouping, here are all my storage nodes. And here are all my proxy nodes, and here are my client nodes, okay? I have a proxy node that has very little memory availability, okay, which you can see based on the size of the cell. The size of my cell is based on memory availability here, okay? If I want to base it on, let's say, allocation of memory, which you would basically see even size cells across the board for all your JVMs, which is what you would expect to see because you would size it as a 1 gig JVMs or 2 gig JVMs, whatever the size happens to be. Okay. So this is some of the analysis work that you can do with, say, heat map, and it's very useful for a pre-production perspective to understand how data is distributed and whether or not your applications are constantly hitting a particular node, so you can see if it's high utilization or high hit counts and all those kind of things. Okay. Now let's move over to Coherence log monitoring. So what I'm doing here is doing real-time log monitoring. So I have all my JVMs instrumented with this log4j appender I mentioned earlier. Okay. And in this case, I'm looking at, well, logs consolidated not just in the visualization here, but also in the back end. I have a rolling log file that keeps getting appended day after day. Okay. This makes it a lot easier for troubleshooting, so you don't have to go ahead and SSH or Telnet or use other log scraping tools. Now, if you have Splunk in place, perfectly fine. Most Coherence users do not have that available, so therefore we provide log monitoring out of the box. And you can filter very easily here too. So if I want to look at only specific host events, so let's look at 111. Okay, so 111, I had you naturally see a lot of these communications delay messages in your Coherence environment, right? So in our environment, like no other, we also see some of these events as well. Okay, there are also some potentially erroneous events also that happen that you may actually see errors or stack traces and other things. When you click on the event, you'll see full detail about that event itself, and these are the logs that come from Coherence. All right. The only thing we do extra special here is that sometimes we would attach, and depending on your configuration, the cluster time. Okay, the cluster time, for those who don't know about it, the cluster time is based on the senior member's time. Okay, and that's a configuration that you have to set whether or not you want the system time or the cluster time to be delivered to the console. So moving over to a different visualization, let's look at the JVM dashboard. Now, regardless whether or not this is Coherence or not, you can monitor the JVM performance over whether, again, storage JVMs or proxy JVMs or client JVMs. So I'm looking at all of my JVMs in my environment, and I can, in this case, sort by CPU utilization, for example, has one of the metrics. But there are many other metrics that are also available in this particular environment, okay, like you see here on the right-hand side. So if I want to look at memory utilization, I can click on here. Okay, and you can see that memory availability across my JVMs, and the types of these JVMs, by the way, are so. In this case, we automatically determine whether or not if it's a coherence node, whether it's a proxy client or storage node. You can also do some filtering. So let's say I'm only interested in looking at my writers. I just type in the word write, and I have one JVM that's the writer, and it happens to be about 70% CPU utilization. So look at my readers. I have a few of them. Okay, 2 of them in fact. Want to look at my proxies? No problem. I have 4 proxies here. 2 of which are not very busy, and which basically means that maybe it's not part of my configuration file to tell my clients to write to these proxies. So this is kind of helpful for us to determine whether or not the environment is properly configured. And if I click on any of these JVMs, by the way, I can look at the JVM properties below. So information about what JVM is it running on, what version, the class path, the input argument, the library path, and any details that you may have specified. And when I mentioned earlier that you can modify the coherence, you can specify process name, rack name, role name, and site name. The names here are, we do not go by these names in order to determine whether or not something's a proxy or a client. It's based on node type that you see here.